Welcome back to the channel, guys. As you can see here, I have the best two-handed bowler in the world with me, and he's gonna help me bowl better two-handed by giving me 4 of his best tips.
All right, guys, let's do it. See if we can help him throw a few more strikes.
All right, Simo, oh buddy, old pal.
All right, so first things first, we gotta start with our push away.
Our push away.
Obviously, solid one-handed player, you know the push away is pretty important there. If your push away is out in front of you, then it's probably gonna end up back behind you. If your push away is going to the right, hips are gonna be wide open, you're gonna feel like you're gonna throw it in the gutter, you're gonna get your elbow around it and probably yank a few shots. So let's make sure we get our push away going towards our target.
That would require me to look at a target, right?
That's okay, those aren't needed.
I love bowling two-handed.
What we see a lot of two-handers struggle with, they're trying so hard to get so many revolutions on it that they're just, muscle is kind of everywhere. Personally, my push away is nice and free. It gets going really easy. It makes it that much easier to repeat. The way I've always tried to look at it is the less muscle you can use, the easier it is to repeat.
Less muscle. That sounds familiar.
So a bad push away, for instance, would be if Darren gets started and he pushes it in here. As he goes to swing it, his body's naturally gonna end up back here. Your body's not gonna allow you to hit yourself. So naturally, as he's coming back around, this elbow's gonna rotate and it's generally gonna cause for a lot of yank shots. Proper push away is gonna be nice and out. That way, as he goes to swing, he's got a free path, and the whole time, his elbow's able to stay right behind it and he's able to work the inside of the ball.
I desperately need that.
Generally speaking, just as you're working the inside of the ball with the better push away, you're gonna notice more overall hook with a lot less effort.
Now that we covered the push away, what's the next step?
Ideally, having a small drift in your approach. I think that's an issue that I sometimes struggle with, is having too much of a drift or not having enough of a drift. With a two-handed player, it's really difficult, I guess, to try to change the trajectory of the swing. Where it's going is where it's going. I like to use just the approach and just use 20 as my example. If you have your ball in your hand and you take a couple steps and you're directly in front, there's nowhere for the ball to actually swing. However, even with just a small border to drift to the left, there's now a free path for it to swing, which will also make it easier to have your hand on the inside of the ball to work the inside.
So is it like the crossover step for one-hander, or does it just have to happen any way possible?
I think it just has to happen in any way possible. Myself, I do it pretty quickly in my approach. Belmo does it in like his third steps. You'll see him take some really large steps. You'll see him take some really small steps. But I just think it's important to have it at some point in your approach. My drift is normally pretty quickly in my approach. I try to get my first and second step moving out of the way in a hurry, just so that it's done, it's out of the way, and then I have as much free space as possible to get my swing wherever I want it to go, depending on if I'm trying to play a little bit straighter or if I'm throwing a little bit slower and hooking the lane a little bit more.
Ah, yes.
Ah! The left is still walled.
I have been bowling this whole time, so easy. All right, so reiterating, just having some kind of crossover to get your legs out of the way for the swing to come back.
To really get the hips out of the way. I think all shapes and sizes, it's important for us to do that just so we are able to have as straight a swing as possible.
So really just do whatever we can to create space for the swing to fall straight back.
Yeah, because
so we don't have to get out, so the swing doesn't have to get out of the way of the body.
Yeah, and you can just let it. So if you were just to take a step forward with no drift, now when you go to swing it, you're going to hit yourself. So naturally, the only way to get around that is to then open your hips up. But if he resets and just has, in that first step, just a small little, now there's room for him to swing the ball.
I feel like switching already.
I think one of the things that I enjoy the most when I show people that is they almost freak out because pretty quickly their ball goes to the right much easier. And I think that's just simply because your body's out of the way. And now, as most two-handers do have a high rev weight, we are throwing it left to right in a hurry pretty quickly. It floats over there and then generally has so much more down lane motion.
That did go over there pretty easy. And it did hook back really easy, so. Free push, free hook. All right, this is tip number 3, the magic 300 tip.
For tip number 3 here, I think it's very, very important to use your legs. As we know, a lot of younger kids start off two-handed. A lot of times the ball is a little too heavy. And they start to get into a tendency where they're really trying to use their upper body and really pull it down and then actually, pull it back to the front of the lane. A lot of my bad shots come from that same thing. It's where I forget to use my legs. It's just so much easier to create leverage and have better balance when you're trying to use the things that are keeping you upright as opposed to the things that are just kind of swinging around on their own. It's kind of one of those things where if you're getting into the slide and you're kind of standing really tall, well, as you go to let go of it, your hand has really no choice but to push it straight onto the lane. One of the things that helps me have such a long flat spot and be able to do as much as I want to it or whatever I want to at the bottom of the swing is having just a nice longer slide. So as I'm in here, my hand's able to stay under the ball the whole time, which then allows me, if I want to roll a little bit more, if I want to rotate a little bit more, I'm at the mercy of what I want to do when my legs are in a good spot. The trick that I tell myself is I like to slide longer. I'm pretty sure I'm sliding the exact same amount. However, it's just a little mental trick that helps me use my legs much better.
All right, let's try this mental trick. That is kind of crazy. Like, I felt like it did feel longer, although it was probably the same, like Simon was saying. But I felt like posting my shot was easier. It also felt like throwing the ball was easier too.
Yeah, that's one of the things, like when I get into a spot where sometimes my ball reaction's a little shaky, or it's like, well, it's good for a couple shots, it's not good for another shot. That's kind of my big tip that I revert back to all the time. Use your legs, use your legs, use your legs. Because generally if I do that, everything else kind of falls into place.
I think the hardest part about telling somebody to use their legs is they don't really know how. So I like that you said slide longer, because now you're thinking about certain steps, certain parts of the approach. So you can really dial in and thinking about a certain thing rather than just thinking, oh, use my legs. Well, there's 4 or 5 steps. Which one do I use?
Yeah, I think it's just finding out how to use them the right way. You kind of have to find your own little tips and tricks. You take it how one person is. That's always been the easiest way for me to not only explain it to people, but it's also the easiest way for me to remember to do it myself. The fourth and final tip today, we're gonna talk foot speed. A lot of times you see people get to running up there or their feet are just way too slow. I think it's good to have a gradual increase in speed, just so it's easier to get that momentum, get the ball going down the lane a little bit. You notice sometimes when people's feet get a little too fast, they start to do what we call chase the swing. So you try to get your legs to catch up to your body, which generally speaking is pretty hard when the upper part of your body has somewhere between a 12 and 16 pound weight. So I think it's important to make sure with the slower foot speed to start, you're able to keep all of your weight centered, which will then allow you to have much better balance at the foul line. And then you don't really want to waste the energy in a spot that's not needed. We don't necessarily need to be our fastest at the back of the approach when we're so far away from making our actual delivery. A lot of times what'll happen is, the way I look at it is like when you go run, if you're going for a sprint, those guys, they're not at full speed right away. They're obviously taking a little bit of time to get to full speed. So if your feet are really fast, your feet end up in front of you, and then the whole time you're trying to play catch up, and which is then gonna equate to having really bad balance at the line. A lot of times when your feet are under you throughout the entire approach, if somebody was to come up and push me at any given moment in the approach, I wouldn't fall over because my legs are under me. With the right tempo, getting a little bit faster to then make it easier to make a quality shot.
All right, so we're gonna start basically the first half of the approach. Small, slow, and then as we progress through the steps, we're
gonna increase our tempo a little bit. Nice, that means he's gonna have to move his feet a little bit.
I actually got more acceleration starting with my feet, moving a little slower, accelerating my feet. Thinking about it even more, it felt like I could throw it even faster because now I'm accelerating faster. It's not necessarily moving faster, but it's going from a slower speed to a faster speed. So I feel like it's easier. Yeah, that's what acceleration is. Essentially, I was doing that more effectively by thinking about having a slower start to my approach.
Yeah, and I think that just allows, because your body is under you, your feet are under you, you're really able to, when you get into that push away, use all of that power, strength, whatever you want to call it, in that push away slide to then get it all of that power getting into actually delivering the ball.
So those are 4 tips from one of the best, if not the best, two-handed bowler in the world. He's gonna help me get better. I'm gonna use those tips for sure. The coolest part is there's 3 more tips. Simon's got his own channel now, so make sure you go over to his, subscribe. Link should be in the description below. So Simon's one of the most versatile players in the world, one of the most creative for sure. He's playing the lanes way different than the rest of us sometimes and having massive success doing it. And if you're interested in taking a deep dive into Simo's game, make sure you go subscribe to his channel.